Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in the last couple of weeks I have been working on some new custom metrics to analyze the Veve data that will give us some new exciting insights, especially when it comes to Veve's user base. If you've been following me on X, you might have seen some of my recent tweets where I have kind of teased some of the metrics I have been working on. So basically, as you can see, these are metrics that allow us to further segment the Veve user base in terms of their activity on the app. This one I shared in December, working on a score to label a user as either a collector or a flipper. And this was a really early iteration of it. I've taken some time to kind of refine the metric. So in this video, I'm going to go over the final version of this metric, show you the different segments, what it is about and how we can use it and what kind of new exciting insights we can get when using this metric. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So first of all, let's look at this kind of collector segmentation. The idea is to label a user on Veve either a collector or a flipper based on their trading behavior on the app. We have 7 tiers from diamond hands collector to aggressive flipper. And the way this tier system works is that underlying there is a collector score that in simple terms is calculated based on how much a user sells of his or hers portfolio. So I tried to visualize it here. So basically, if you imagine this is kind of represents the lifetime purchases of a user. Let's say I have purchased 100 items on Veve since I've started using the app. If I have kept most of my purchases and haven't sold more than 5% of the items that I've purchased, I would be classified a diamond hands collector. On the other side, if I had sold the majority of my items and I only kept like a maximum of 5% of the items that I have purchased, then I would be an aggressive flipper. So basically, you can think of it as a scoring system that goes from 1 to 100. And you can see that the aggressive flipper and diamond hands collector, they are both smaller segments because they represent the extremes. So your aggressive flipper if your score is 0 to 5, while you're only a diamond hands collector if your score is like from 95 to 100. The middle tiers are more or less equally sized. So a trader would be a score between 40 and 60, the collector 60 to 80, and then the series collector 80 to 95. And the other way around. So the flipper would be 40 to 20, the season flipper 20 to 5, and the aggressive flipper 5 to 0. So, and why is this useful? If you have ever asked yourself like how many real collectors are there on Veve versus how many flippers are there, with this metric we will get the answer. As I will also show in a minute, we can use this metric to look at the owners of a specific collectible, and this will also give us like a really interesting insight for that collectible, but more on that later. Now I have 2 more metrics which are kind of similar because they go into the user activity. First I have the activity status. This metric labels a user depending on the last day the user was active. This metric is always calculated based like on a snapshot day. So if we take today, then you would be an active user if you have been active in the last 15 days. And again, always when I refer to active, it's not opening the app, but it's making a transaction on Veve. So if you have made a transaction in the last 15 days, you would be an active user. If your last transaction was between 15 and 30 days ago, you would be an engaged user. If your last transaction was between 1 month and 3 months ago, then you are already a dormant user. Then if your last transaction is 3 to 6 months ago, then you're a lapsed user. If your last transaction is 6 months to a year or almost a year ago, then you're an inactive user. And if your last transaction was more than a year ago or more than 360 days ago, then you are labeled a ghost user. So quite straightforward. Again, this metric is super interested when looking for a certain collectible, because then we can see the proportion of a collectible that are in inactive wallets. And last metric is also tied to activity, but here I look more on the overall engagement of the wallet. So basically I take the whole time frame a user has been active since the first day a user has been active on Veve, and I break it down into weeks. And then I calculate like how many weeks of those weeks a user has been active. So let's say I've been active on Veve for 100 weeks, which is almost 2 years. If out of those 100 weeks, I have been active at least 80 or more than 80 weeks, then I would be a loyal user. If I have been active between 60 and 80 weeks, I would be a regular user. If I have been active between 40 and 60 weeks, I would be an active user. If I've been only active 20 to 40 weeks out of those 100 weeks, then I would be a casual user. And if I've been only active 1 to 20 weeks out of those 100 weeks, then I would be a sporadic user. So this metric is also interesting because it gives us a hint on how engaged the user base is. We often look at the daily active users, especially like on my VeveX tracker, for example. And I think currently we are around like 2,000 to 3,000 active users daily. But it's true that not every user is active or is participating on the marketplace every day on Veve, not even every week. There are some users, and we will see there are even some whale users that haven't been consistently active on Veve. They are just maybe buying more sporadically. So yeah, this is just like another lens on how to segment the user base. Now, to showcase how we can use these metrics on the Veve data and what insights we can gain, I prepared this analysis on all the active wallets in 2023. So these include all wallets that have made at least one transaction between the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2023. In total, we have approximately 74,000 wallets that have been active during that time period. First, we have the distribution by cohort. So this means when the wallet was first active. And we see that 60% of the current user base, or of the user base that was active in 2023, 60% were from the 2021 cohort, or also 2020. However, as the migration to IMX happened at the beginning of 2021, those are also like in the 2021 cohort. This shows us that still the majority of the user base is kind of this OG user base. Then we have 26% of users that came in 2022 and almost 14% of new users that came in 2023. Now, and this is the super interesting part, because this is like the whole debate that we always have, like, is Veve used mostly by flippers or by collectors? And I think this chart is just so beautiful because it shows that it's actually like almost 50-50. So half of the user base on Veve are collectors, while half of the user base are flippers. And even if we go into the like extreme tiers, which are the diamond hand collectors, which are 23% of the user base, versus the aggressive flippers, which are also almost 23%. Yeah, this is just super interesting for me to see. Then again, also all the other tiers are fairly equally sized. Of course, we want to kind of increase the purple side here. Especially Veve is doing a lot to make the app appeal more to collectors. We've seen a lot of things happening towards that. And if you have watched my last video, which was the 2023 review, actually a lot of metrics are showing a shift towards more collecting user base. So very interesting to see this snapshot now, and I'm really curious to see how this will evolve like in the coming year. So next we have the engagement metrics, and yeah, this is basically what I wanted to say. Like most of the users, or at least 54% of the users that were active, were actually only active sporadically, which again shows that the users on Veve, they are not necessarily active like every week, although there are like drops happening every week. It makes sense that if you're a collector, you just want to go for the drops that you like, and even if you're like a flipper, you most likely go for the drop that you think you will make some gain on it. We do have like a 5% user base, which is still 4,000, almost 4,000 users, which have been active almost every week, which is actually not bad. Like 5% is still considerable. Yeah, next we have the distribution by last activity. And this is also quite interesting to see, because we do see like a very huge proportion, like almost 40% of users that are already inactive. That means from this snapshot of the user base, which is the users that have been active in 2023, 27,000 users haven't been active for at least 6 months. So their last transaction was actually like in the first half of 2023, and they haven't been active in the last half of 2023. We even have a few ghost users already, so these are users that have been active only at the beginning of 2023 or in the first 5 days, because then they haven't been active for 360 days. And of course, this chart is a bit tricky because of all the users that came in the second half of 2023. They won't even be able to be in these tiers. This metric is actually more interesting if we look at it for a certain collectible. And I have an example for you later where we go over this metric for a collectible. And there it's very interesting to see like the owners of a collectible, if they have been active recently or not. It's actually what I've showed you in this example. This is for one Grail collectible, and we saw that there were 20% of the wallets owning this collectible. They haven't been active, and if you stay until the end of the video, I will tell you which collectible this is. Back to our analysis. So next what I looked at was basically a breakdown of the collector tiers by the cohort, but this time the cohort is split into quarters. So here we have the users that came in Q4 2021, and this also includes like 2022 users again. Then we have here Q1 2022 and so on. And I think this is also very interesting because here we can clearly see that most of the flippers came into the app during like the last half of 2022. Also, again, the nice thing to see here is that in 2023, how in each quarter we had a bigger proportion of collectors coming into the app versus flippers. Just have a look for comparison, the amount of diamond hand collectors that we have in the app, of those users that made their first transaction in the quarter 4 of 2023 versus those users that came in during 2020 and 2021. Here it was also very balanced. So the OG cohort is a very balanced cohort in terms of like flippers versus collectors. Then we saw, of course, more and more flippers coming into the app, and then luckily a very nice trend into more collectors coming into the app. Next, I have the same chart, but instead of looking at the cohort, I split the user base into their wallet size. And I think this comes to no surprise that the higher or the bigger your wallet size, like the whales, the higher the percentage of collectors. Whereas, of course, if your wallet size is 0, then you're probably an aggressive flipper because you sold all of your items that you have purchased. So next, I looked at the engagement level by the collector tiers. And this is also, I think, interesting to see that even like the diamond hand collectors, they are mostly like 70% are sporadic users. Again, what I explained earlier, even if you're a diamond hand collector, does not mean that you go for every drop, but you go for those drops that you like, or if you're a flipper, you go for that drop where you think you will make a gain. And lastly, if we look at the last active tier, we do also see that we have some ghost users that are actually diamond hand collectors. So now you might think, okay, so they may be users that just bought 1 or 2 collectibles and that's it, and they maybe left the app and they never sold because prices dropped. So they would also be in the diamond hand collector tier because you purchased 2, you didn't sell any, so basically you're still 100% owning your portfolio. And you might think, okay, so this probably skews the data, and that's why I added this filter here, lifetime purchases. We can also look at the data filtering by how many items you purchased. So let's say we want to see only wallets that have bought at least 100 items on Veve. Then we can update. We'll see that we're down to 22,000 wallets now, of which 80% are the early 2021 users. But we see, like, from the proportions here of the collector tiers, nothing really much has changed. Diamond hand collectors and aggressive flipper have become a bit smaller, but basically we still have these 50-50 split. The rest also remained more or less the same, nothing much changed. We can even go one further. We can say, okay, I'm only interested in those wallets that have purchased at least 1,000. And again, the 50-50 split. So you see, it's not like a fluke. It's not that I skewed the data because I include all the users that only purchased 1 item and then were never active on Veve. Even if we look at wallets that purchased over 1,000 items on Veve, we get this 50-50 split into collectors versus flippers. Tell me what you think about it in the comments down below. Super interesting what you think about it. And yeah, so much about the wallet analysis. Now there's one last thing I wanted to show you where we can use these metrics for, and this is when we look for the owners of a specific collectible. And that's what I prepared here, and I took as an example collectible, I chose Donny. I think it's a very interesting collectible because it has a very low edition size. It's a season 1 collectible and it's mostly in the hands of whale wallets as far as we know. The price is very high and it has been relatively stable as well. So just we are going to exclude the VEVE wallet because we don't want to skew the data with the VEVE wallet for a collectible. So with the VEVE wallet excluded, we have the circulating supply for Donny, which is 110. In total, we have 48 owners. And then this is a new metric as well that I haven't explained yet. And this is the Gini coefficient. If you're familiar with economics in general, then you might have heard the Gini coefficient because it is a metric that calculates income inequality on an economic level, like for a country, for example. And I use the same approach here to kind of calculate the distribution inequality for a collectible. So what do I mean by that? The Gini coefficient is a number between 0 and 1. And the lower the coefficient, that means all owners hold the equal amount of tokens. So basically, if we have 110 Donnies and we would have 110 owners, and each owner would own one collectible, then the Gini coefficient would be the lowest. While if most of the Donnies were to be concentrated in one wallet, then the higher the Gini coefficient would be. And more or less the threshold is 0.4. Well, you would say it's kind of unequal. And we know that there's one wallet that holds a lot of Donnies, and that's why the coefficient is actually quite high. Why I include this coefficient, why I think it's super interesting to look at for collectible on Veve is basically the higher the Gini coefficient, the more prone the collectible is for market manipulation. Basically, it indicates how much supply of this collectible is concentrated in few wallets. So one wallet owns most of the supply of a collectible. We know that that wallet could basically manipulate the market for that collectible. So that's why I included it here, and that's also why I kind of wanted to use Donny as an example, because it's quite unique when it comes to these metrics. Then again, to no surprise, we see that most of the supply, almost 80% of the supply of Donny, is in the hand of diamond hand collectors, and there's no Donny in any flipper wallets. And there's actually only one token in a trader wallet. And then that's why I said this metric is actually more interesting to look at on a collectible basis. We see that 70% of those owners are quite active. So they have been active in when the snapshot was the end of 2023. So they had been active at least in the 50 days before I took that snapshot. We do have 3 tokens that are in a wallet that hasn't been active for more than 360 days. And yeah, then the other 2, I think you might already be familiar if you have seen one of my collectible spotlight breakdowns. Here is the distribution by the amount held by one wallet. So here we have one wallet that holds between 20 and 30 tokens, and there are 36 wallets that only hold one item. So basically this shows kind of the distribution of the tokens within wallets, and this is also what then represents the Gini coefficient. We see here that there's actually almost 50% of tokens distributed in only 3 wallets. So that's why we have such a high Gini coefficient. Then here we see again the distribution of the tokens according to the wallet size. And to no surprise, most of the owners are whale wallets. And lastly, I created this spider chart. It's called, where we have the 4 main metrics, which is the collector score, the activity score, the Gini score, and the whale score. And it gives us a profile for that collectible, which we can then compare to other collectibles. So here we have a very high collector score. We have seen that means we have a lot of diamond hand collector and upper collector tiers. The activity score is also quite high. We have seen that 70% of the wallets have been active recently. The Gini score is also quite high. Remember that ideally we want to see a lower Gini score because of the possible market manipulation. And then the whale score shows out how much of the supply is in whale wallets versus like smaller wallets. So I know that was a lot of information in one video. I will try to summarize all this information about how the different metrics are defined and also these kind of breakdown analytics in a newsletter post, and I will publish it on my newsletter VeveFox Insider. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I will leave the link down in the description below. Yeah, and I hope you found this interesting. I hope you're as excited as I am about these kind of new ways that we can look at the data, look at our user base, and also look at the different collectibles. I'm already working on some new concept on content where I will be using these metrics, which I will either do videos about or in the form of these newsletters. And yeah, if you don't want to miss out on them, remember to subscribe to my channel and also subscribe to my newsletter so you won't miss any of those. And of course, as promised, for those of you who stayed until the end, I'm going to reveal which grey collectible I was talking about in this post, and it is the Disney Partners statue. So, Disney Partners statue, now you know 20% of the wallets haven't been active for more than 360 days. Now, before you think that these wallets will get closed and we will take over the collectibles, remember we are talking about activity in terms of transactions. It is possible that these wallets that haven't been active, that they did actually open the app or used Veve but just didn't make a transaction. It's something that they cannot see in the data, so just bear that in mind when making any decision based on this information. I think this video is way longer than I wanted it to be, but I hope it was interesting. Please leave me again in the comments down below what you think about it, what you would like to see me analyzing with these metrics. And see you in the next one. Bye.